Hello and welcome back. My name is Dr. Delmico L. Cunningham, better known as Dr. Media. I know, my digital mutants, it has been a very long time since I posted a new video here on the channel. I am blessed that so many people still have found knowledge and just help with the videos that I had already posted. I'm trying to get back into a better posting schedule. My current everyday 9 to 5 job is what is impeding that, and it's not really impeding it in a bad way. I'm doing some fantastic things. There's more things that I'll be able to talk about later in 2019, early 2020, when we actually launch the product that I'm currently working on as a user experience designer and user interface developer. So anyway, back to what I wanted to talk about today. So in my previous videos, I did a lot of work with Freenas. So you know that I love the FreeBSD platform. I think it's a really great platform to work with, and that is what Freenas is built off of if you want to build your own NAS. So with that, as I started looking at my network and started thinking more about security and being able to really control the traffic that comes in and leaves my network, I looked towards another FreeBSD product, and that being OPNSense. So there are two firewall router programs that you can get that are based on FreeBSD. One being OPNSense, and the other one being OPNSense, so OPNSense. Now, a lot of people will take one side or the other. You know, they'll be like, well, you should go with OPNSense. And I promise you, if you do a search for OPNSense, you're not going to find many tutorials with OPNSense. Now, the opensense.org, the actual wiki pages are full of information, and sometimes the information is very high level, and you have to really understand a lot of things to get through it. So it's not the best layman's technical resource. So keep that in mind. Now, in my opinion, OPNSense and OPNSense, both, one's not, I won't say one's better than the other. I'll say that they took different paths. The one thing and the one reason why I chose OPNSense over OPNSense is that the original project was called Monowall, which is what the FreeBSD kind of open, router type thing was built on. So Monowall is kind of the grandfather of OPNSense and OPNSense. So some of the people that worked on OPNSense decided to branch off and do OPNSense. So two of the reasons that I chose OPNSense is, one, that Manuel Casper, the original creator of Monowall, gave the blessing to the developers at OPNSense that, you guys are basically kind of like, you guys are doing it the way that I would do it if I were still doing this. So I'm giving you my blessing. And two, OPNSense has partnered with FreeBSD hardened. So a hardened version of FreeBSD is like FreeBSD on steroids as far as security goes. So it's a hardened version of FreeBSD, and also OPNSense runs on FreeBSD 11.2, which is the same version that Freenas runs on, which is 11.2. OPNSense is lagging behind. I believe it's on a variant of version 10. So it's a little bit behind, even though 11.2 is out there. I know that OPNSense is doing some things to catch up in that sense. So, it's not really one's better than the other. Those are just the reasons why I chose OPNSense. Finding that there's not a lot of tutorials for it, that's something that I wanted to bring to the channel to bring more education to how to use OPNSense. So I've done two things. One, I have an OPNSense router. So this OPNSense router, you can see it's running on a Celeron J1800, and it's 2.4 gigahertz with 2 cores and 8 gigs of RAM. This is an overkill motherboard for a router. If you look at most modern routers, like from Asus or Netgear or one of those different variants. They also have a processor inside of them. Usually it's something very akin to a single board computer, something almost like a Raspberry Pi. So they're not desktop grade chips that are in there, and I'm not disparaging on the fact that they're not desktop grade chips. It's just the fact that they kind of come in at like maybe 1.1, 1.2 gigahertz, and they're usually dual cores. They're sometimes 4 cores. Now I have a Ubiquiti AC Lite access point as one of my 2 access points, and I'll say, as small as that Ubiquiti point is, it actually gets pretty hot. It gets pretty warm for just routing traffic. All it does is just route Wi-Fi traffic, so it's not doing a lot, but it gets pretty hot. Now with this Celeron, I purchased this. This is a gigabit Celeron. It's pretty old. You can get it on eBay for right around $24, $25, and then the RAM cost me about the same. So when I was buying this, I actually bought 2 of these, and I'll bring up a picture of the motherboard. So this is the motherboard that I'm using currently. So the only thing to be concerned with is that this motherboard does not use regular DIMM slot. It doesn't use regular DIMM slots for the RAM. It uses SODIMM slots, which are the laptop interfaces for RAM. So just keep that in mind, that you will have to get SODIMM. Now this is DDR3 SODIMM, so it was pretty cheap as well. Like 8 gigs was like $24. And then I paired that with a 1U server case and a 300 watt power supply. The power supply is kind of actually overkill. I just happen to have it laying around, so I might get a power supply with less wattage, because it doesn't need that much. It's not doing anything except routing traffic. So once I had that, I was able to go to OPNSense.org, and at OPNSense.org you'll see the newest version is 19.1, which is actually what I'm running. So I just went and I downloaded, so I'll show you where to go to download this. So I can go here and download this, choose my architecture. That Celeron is a 64-bit Celeron, so a 64-bit architecture. So I'm going to do AMD 64, and I did mine as a VGA, and then chose a mirror, and then downloaded it. You can choose whatever mirror you want. Download it, load it onto a USB stick, and once you have it loaded, it will boot directly into OPNSense at the command line level. So you do want to have a monitor connected to the machine when you do it, and then you'll just go through the installer path. So when you're logging in, instead of logging in as root, you'll just log in as installer, and I believe the password is OPNSense for that. If you want to see a video on actually how to install OPNSense, let me know, and I'll do a video. Let me know in the comments down below, and I'll do a video on that separately. So what's really cool, why am I so excited about this, and what makes this really cool for me? So 3 things make this really cool. 1, I'm no longer dependent upon my Comcast gateway router to do my routing and try to protect my computers and my home. I'm a Comcast business class customer, so I have one of their SMC gateways. It's got 4 ports on it, and it's pretty basic in what it does. You can do some port forwarding on it. That's really kind of about it. I mean, you could sit there and make a blacklist of sites that you don't want to go to, and make a white list of sites that you want to go to. That's really involved, and it still doesn't stop, like, intrusion detection. It doesn't have like intrusion detection and things of that nature. I can't run antivirus on that device. Now with OPNSense, I actually can. If you look here in my services, I'm running Clam AV Damien. So if you're familiar with Linux and FreeBSD and kind of those Unix-based systems, you'll know that Clam AV is an antivirus engine that you can run in Linux, because Linux can have viruses. And if people say that Linux doesn't have viruses, it can. There's just not that many people that can write the viruses that can affect Linux. So I'm able to actually run Clam AV on my router. So as my traffic comes in over my WAN and gets dispersed out to my LAN, it's going to look at that traffic and try to find things that, might have viruses in them, might have Trojans in them. It's going to try to catch that before it ever gets to the computer. Now, what I'm going to tell you is using ClamAV is great, but that does not mean that you should not have antivirus software on your actual computer. Personally, I like Bitdefender, and I only use their antivirus version of the software. And you might ask, well, Dr. Media, why would you use another antivirus if you have antivirus running on your router? Well, if I plug in a hard drive or plug in a USB stick, then my router is not going to find those Trojans or those viruses. It's only going to find things coming in over the internet or trying to come in over the internet. So that's one reason why I chose to go with the OPNSense router. The second reason is I wanted a way. I was currently using TeamViewer, and TeamViewer is great. I don't use much of the features that TeamViewer has. I really don't need them. I really just need remote access to my computers when I'm outside of my network. And the thing about it is, the other thing is that TeamViewer, I would have to install that on every machine in my home to be able to do that. And we've got about 8 machines running in here, 4 of them being work computers and 4 of them being gaming machines. So when I'm on my local network, I'll just use remote desktop and just remote desktop into a machine and do what I need to do to it. So I wanted a way to be able to be a road warrior and have VPN access back to my home network. That is another thing that OPNSense helps you be able to do. I'm running OpenVPN. OpenVPN is a free VPN client. The server runs on the firewall, and you can install the client in Windows. If you want to see that process, once again, that's one of those things. Leave a comment down below that you want to see, how OPNSense, how to set the server up on OPNSense, how to set up the OpenVPN server, and how to connect the client. It actually works fantastically. So when I'm outside of my network, I'm actually able to VPN back into my home network, and my computer shows up as if it's on the network. So I can go to computers by their local LAN addresses and not have to have TeamViewer installed on every machine that I have in my home. So that's reason 2 that I chose using OPNSense as my router. The third reason was the fact that now I have control over my network. If I go in here and I look at my firewall, so I can go to firewall, I'll go in here to my rules, and I'll go to my LAN. So I can put any rules in here that I want to. I can lock out. So you can see right now, I've actually disabled IPv6 from even being able to have DHCP or being able to leak out of my network. That's one thing I don't think people think about, is that IPv6 was created so we could have more IP addresses, and they're really crazy long IP address things for IPv6. But IPv6, because people don't think about it and use it that often, it can leak out of your network. And what I mean by that is that those IPv6 addresses can sometimes float out, and someone can find them and be able to get access over IPv6. Well, I've locked IPv6 out of my network. Even though Comcast allows me to use IPv6 to get IPv6 network addresses, I've basically just locked it out. I said, you know what? I only want to have IPv4 and nothing else. The other thing I was able to do with this is I can set up my port forwarding. So all of my port forwarding is coming, I have that set up, and what's really cool here inside of OPNSense is that you can make aliases. So the alias basically gives a name to an IP address. So I don't have to remember all the IP addresses. I have to when I first set it up. So if you see it in here under aliases, I would go into aliases and set up a brand new alias, give it the IP address, and then when I make a firewall rule, I can refer to that alias and not have to type out the IP address every time I want to make a rule based off of that. And I can also disable the things in here. If I wanted to disable this on WAN, so, if I wanted to disable my Nextcloud server, I could, boom, click that and it would disable it. I wouldn't be able to have access to it anymore outside of my network, which is, once again, pretty useful. The other thing that I have in here, and I haven't set this up yet, is I have the ability to shape my network. So let's say you've got, 70 megs coming into your home, and you want to take 10 megs of that, and you want to dedicate that to VoIP protocol and voice over internet, transmission between your in-home network to out. So what you could do is use a shaper, and you could do that. You could set up a tunnel, set up a pipe, and tell it how much of your bandwidth to use for that particular service. So if you had Netflix and you wanted to make sure you're always, no matter what else is happening on your network, that you always get like 20 megs or whatever for Netflix, you can do a shaper and shape your network out and be able to do that, which is pretty freaking fantastic. And that's pretty awesome. So those are just some of the reasons why I chose to install OPNSense, and it did it pretty economically. Like I say, the motherboard cost me $20, the RAM cost me $20, and then a server, 1U server case cost me $40. So I'm looking at like $80, and then with the power supply, would have probably, if I had to buy it, which I already had one, if I had to buy it, probably would have been another $20 or $30. So I'm right around $100 for this installation of OPNSense. Oh, and also I had an SSD, but I got an SSD for $20, brand new SSD for $20. So it's like 120 because I don't need much space on this. There's not really anything running on this except OPNSense itself. And that's really kind of the abundance of what I have running. The other thing that I went and installed, and this actually ties back into Freenas, is that I went and I installed a project called Pi-hole. And now you might be like, Dr. Media, quit bugging. What are you talking about, Pi-hole? So Pi-hole is, as you can see, Pi-hole is a network-wide ad blocking. So it works pretty well. What they've done is they have created, or they pull from a lot of blacklist of URLs that basically have ads running to them. So if you don't know, Google recently gave a little bit of whispers that they were going to disable ad blocking extensions for Chrome. And this is what kind of got me started thinking about, how my network was performing and things that were happening on my network. So they said they were going to stop letting that be used, basically, right? They're going to be like, well, we're going to block all ad blocking. They're going to block all the ad blocking extensions for Chrome, and which is what a lot of people use. So what Pi-hole does is Pi-hole is running. You can run this on a Raspberry Pi, which is why I got the name Pi-hole. So most people run it on a Raspberry Pi. I didn't want to dedicate a Raspberry Pi to do that. If you look, you can see, if you go to install, you'll see that Pi-hole doesn't just run on a Raspberry Pi. It actually runs on Linux. It runs on versions of Linux, and I think that's about it. So you can run it on Ubuntu. You can run it in a Docker if you have Docker. You can run it, like I say, on a Raspberry Pi, whatever. The biggest thing that you need to know is that you need to have a static IP address for your Pi-hole device, because you don't want that address bouncing around when you hit, when your DHCP refreshes, if you have it to refresh. Currently now for me, all of my DHCP is being handled by OPNSense. So if I go in here and look at my DHCP v4, you can see all my leases, and doesn't matter, these are all private. So you can see all the leases that I have. So even though some things in here show up twice, what I'm able to do is I'm able to take that MAC address and associate it with an IP address. So even though DHCP is turned on and it's within that DHCP range, I'm able to pluck it out and say, I want you to keep this address whenever you connect and wherever you look for a lease. I want you to be leased the same IP address every time. So with Pi-hole, all you have to do is install. What I did was I did a virtual machine on Freenas, so I can show you that. So let's go here. So I've got Freenas running. So what I have in here, I have 2 virtual machines running. So these are just regular virtual machines, and I installed Ubuntu Server in both of these. So this one has 2 CPUs. I don't really see it needing more, and I gave it 2 gigs of RAM because it doesn't need a lot. And with that, I was able to install Pi-hole in there. The only thing I had to do was use this installation method right here. It's curl -ssl https://install.pi-hole-hole.net pipe bash. By doing that and doing it at command line, it basically installed Pi-hole. Now, one thing that I will tell you that you have to do when you go to install Pi-hole is, if it's a brand new configuration of Ubuntu, and I'm using Ubuntu 18.04 Bionic Beaver, it's an LTS build of, I believe it's an LTS of Ubuntu. I had to also install Java 8 because by default, when I went to run the service to start Pi-hole, I was getting an error. And then I started thinking, I was like, well, this is a brand new install of Ubuntu. It doesn't have Java or anything else installed. So it needed to have Java installed, and that's really about it. So I had to make sure that I had a copy of Java on that machine as well, on that virtual machine as well. And that was really it. So what I was able to do after that is go in here to my DHCP server on OPNSense. So I went in here, let's go to my DHCP and go to my LAN. So this is my LAN, and you can see I have a DNS server, and my DNS server is 10.110.41. And that actually is the same address. I'll pull this down here. You can see that 10.110.41 is the address of this virtual machine. So basically what happens is, whenever I send out a request to look at a website, the DNS resolution goes through this. And if it has ads in it that this recognizes, it will block them. And I can show you a quick, see if we can do like a quick a thing of that. So let's see, if I came in here and I wanted to go to, let's say AOL.com. I don't know why you go to AOL.com anymore. You're right, it's no need to go to AOL.com anymore. So if I click on like this guy here, you can see it starts to go up. So now it's 1066.67. So if you look at my page right now, this is the only thing that sucks, is that even though the ads have been removed, the spaces where the ads exist at are still there. So you can see there's a box here where an ad choice ad was supposed to show up. It never loaded because the DNS server blocked it. Same thing here, blocked it. So it works pretty well. It's a pretty cool little program. Doesn't take up much space, and it basically replaces ad blocker. I've pretty much turned off ad blocker as an extension for Chrome, and I just now use Pi-hole. Pi-hole does all my DNS stuff. So even if you didn't have OPNSense, if you wanted to get a Raspberry Pi and install Pi-hole on that Raspberry Pi, give that Raspberry Pi a static IP address, then you could use the router that you already have, and use, instead of using one of like Google's DNS servers like 888, what is it, 8.8.8.8 and 8.8.4.4, instead of using those, you could use Pi-hole, and whatever your IP address that you assign to Pi-hole would be your DNS address. And you can even see if I go into Windows and look at my network. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit farther away. But if you see, if I go in here and look at my adapters, got multiple. There we go. So if I look at my adapters and go here to details, you'll see because I entered that guy as, you know, so because I entered this guy by my Pi-hole instance as the DNS for my router, whenever my DHCP sends out a DHCP IP request, it also sends this DNS server as the DNS that it should have. So this is set to automatically to, as you can see, this is set to DHCP. It's enabled, and you can see my default gateway. You can see the DHCP server sits on 10.1.10.1, and then my DNS server now is 10.1.10.41. So that's actually pretty cool that I'm able to do that and use Pi-hole to basically block ads. It's pretty awesome. Like I say, when I did it, I basically uninstalled ad blocker from my from my Chrome, because it was like there's no point to have ad blocker running when Pi-hole is doing, you know, so much to block. And you can see it's blocking all these queries that are coming in, and it's showing how many clients are connected. And you can even blacklist. You can come in here and blacklist certain websites, and you can whitelist certain websites to actually have access that by default blocks that gets blocked. So you can actually see how much traffic is blocked by client. And the computer that I'm currently on is .23, and you can see there's been 969 requests that have been blocked, and then a total of 3,060 requests total. And out of that 3,061, rather, 969 of them were ad requests. So that's pretty amazing. So hopefully you got something out of this. If you want to see more about, like we say, how to set up OPNSense for yourself and how to go through and set up Pi-hole, then let me know. This is kind of an introductory video for stuff that I'm adding to the channel. So the next video that I do is actually going to be more focused towards Freenas. Freenas has made some incredible changes here recently with 11.2. So there's some other things to talk about with like the plugin system and getting stuff up and running in Freenas 11.2. So look out for those videos coming up in the next week. And as always, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you got something out of it. I hope you learned something. And until next, you know, make sure that if you want to stay up with great content like this, that you hit the subscribe and also hit that notification bell that you can know when new things are posted to the channel, which I promise is going to get better than it has in the last couple of months. So until next time, my digital mutants, I will see you later.